Time has a way of slipping through your fingers when you're not paying attention. Emma used to tell me that, her voice tinged with a sadness I never quite understood. Life isn't just about deadlines and meetings, David, she'd say, dark eyes reflecting the blue light of my computer screen. I'd smile and promise to cut back, but we both knew I wouldn't. The software company I worked for was on the verge of a major release, and as lead developer, I couldn't afford to slow down. Not now. Not when we were so close. I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Friday in late September, and I was debugging a critical security flaw that had somehow slipped past our testers. The office was empty except for the quiet hum of servers and the clicking of my keyboard. Emma had texted earlier, but I'd barely glanced at the message. Something about dinner. Something about us needing to talk. The code on my screen blurred as fatigue set in. I'd been at it for 16 hours straight, fueled by nothing but coffee and the gnawing anxiety of impending deadlines. That's when my phone buzzed again. Emma's face appeared on the screen, a photo from happier times. Us at the beach last summer, before the promotion, before the endless nights at the office. David. Her voice was different somehow. Stronger. More determined than I'd heard in months. I'm outside. I blinked, looking through the glass walls of my office toward the elevator lobby. Sure enough, there she was, wearing that vintage leather jacket I'd given her for her birthday 3 years ago. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, a few strands falling loose around her face. Emma, I'm in the middle of something crucial. The security patch. Can wait, she finished, walking into my office. Everything can wait. We need this, David. I need this. There was something in her eyes that stopped my usual protests. A desperation, maybe, or determination. She reached over and closed my laptop before I could object. Let's just drive, she said, already pulling me up from my chair. Like we used to when we first started dating. Remember? No destination, no plan. Just us and the open road. I wanted to refuse. The code was waiting. The deadline was looming. But then Emma smiled. A real smile, the kind I hadn't seen in months, and I felt something inside me crack. When was the last time we'd done anything spontaneous? When was the last time I'd really looked at her, really seen her? The night was unusually cold for September, a thin fog rolling in from the bay as we left the city behind. Emma drove while I tried not to think about work, about the hundreds of emails waiting for responses, about the project milestones slipping further out of reach. The streetlights grew fewer and farther between until there was nothing but darkness and the sweep of our headlights across empty road. You know what I miss? Emma said suddenly, glancing at me. Her fingers drummed a nervous rhythm on the steering wheel. The way you used to look at me like I was the most fascinating thing in the world. The way you used to tell me about your dreams, not just the next deadline or the next promotion, but real dreams. Remember that startup idea you had? The app that would help people reconnect with old friends? Whatever happened to that? The words hit harder than they should have. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. What had happened to that dream? When had I stopped being the person who had wild ideas and started being the person who only cared about meeting expectations? Before I could find an answer, the engine sputtered and died. Perfect, I muttered, checking the dash. The fuel gauge hovered just above empty. Emma pulled over, the car coasting to a stop on the shoulder. In the distance, a single light pierced the fog, a gas station, its sign barely visible through the mist. It's only about half a mile, Emma said. We can walk it. The fog thickened as we walked, wrapping around us like a damp blanket. Something about it felt wrong, but I couldn't say why. Maybe it was the way it muffled our footsteps, or how it seemed to pulse slightly, like it was breathing. Or maybe it was the way it made the world feel smaller, like everything beyond our immediate vicinity had ceased to exist. Do you ever think about that night in college? Emma asked suddenly. The night we met? I did. It was another foggy night, almost 7 years ago. I'd been walking home from the library, lost in thoughts about coding projects and upcoming exams. She was sitting on a bench in the quad, camera in hand, trying to capture the way the fog wrapped around the old oak trees. You asked me what I was looking for, she said, smiling at the memory. And I said, the moments between moments. I finished. I thought you were crazy. Maybe I was. Maybe I still am. She stopped walking, turning to face me. But that's what I'm looking for now, David. The moments between moments. The spaces where life actually happens. While we're too busy planning for tomorrow to notice, the gas station emerged from the mist like a ghost ship at sea. It was an old place, the kind that still had analog pumps and a bell that rang when you opened the door. A sign in the window flickered between open and 24 hours in weak neon, casting alternating shadows across the cracked pavement. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sickly glow over shelves of dusty snacks and outdated magazines. The clerk, an elderly woman with steel-gray hair, didn't look up from her crossword puzzle as we approached. The nameplate on her uniform read Margaret, though the letters seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them. "Excuse me," I said. "Our car ran out of gas down the road. Could we buy a gas can?" She looked up slowly, her pale eyes focusing somewhere just past my shoulder. "You've been here before," she said. It wasn't a question. "No, we haven't," Emma replied. "We've never been to this area." The woman smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too white. "Not yet, but you will be." Again and again. She paused, tapping her pen against the crossword puzzle. "Time isn't what you think it is, you know. It's not a line. It's more like a pool. Every moment exists simultaneously, rippling out, affecting every other moment. Sometimes the ripples collide, and then—" she made a gesture with her hands, like waves crashing together. Before I could ask what she meant, the lights flickered. In that brief moment of darkness, something changed. The woman was gone. In her place sat a young man in a modern uniform, typing on his phone. "Can I help you?" he asked, looking up. Emma gripped my arm. "David, look." She pointed to the security monitor behind the counter. On the screen, I could see us, Emma and me, walking into the store. But we were wearing different clothes, and then different ones again, and again. The images kept changing, showing us entering the store dozens of times, each time slightly different. Some versions of us looked younger, like we did in college. Others looked older, with gray in my hair and lines around Emma's eyes. In one image, Emma wore a wedding dress. In another, she wasn't there at all. Just me, alone, looking lost and hollow. "What is this?" I demanded, but the clerk was gone again. The lights flickered once more, and suddenly we were outside, standing by our car. But it wasn't where we'd left it. It was parked at one of the gas pumps. "We need to leave," Emma whispered. "Now." I jumped into the driver's seat, turning the key. The engine roared to life, and I pulled out onto the road, pressing the accelerator hard. In the rearview mirror, the gas station's lights faded into the fog. "Did that really happen?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. "It felt like a dream," I finished, "or a nightmare." We drove in silence for several minutes, both trying to process what we'd experienced. Then Emma gasped. Ahead of us, through the fog, a familiar light pierced the darkness. The same gas station, its sign still flickering weakly. "Impossible," I muttered. "We've been driving straight away from it." But there it was. And as we drove past, I saw ourselves through the window, standing at the counter, talking to a clerk who wasn't there. I hit the accelerator harder, but it didn't matter. Every turn, every straight stretch of road, led us back to that same station. After the fifth time, I noticed something in the rearview mirror. Emma was crying, but the tears were running up her face. The dashboard clock was spinning backward. Outside, the fog wasn't just moving. It was forming patterns, symbols I almost recognized from long-forgotten dreams. "David," Emma whispered, "I need to tell you something." I turned to look at her, but her voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "When you asked me what I was looking for that night in college," I lied. "I wasn't just photographing the fog. I was waiting for someone. For you." "What do you mean?" "I'd seen you before. In dreams. In moments between moments. I knew you were coming, just like I knew this night would come." She reached into her bag and pulled out an old photograph. It showed the gas station, exactly as it looked now, but the date stamp read 1973. "That's impossible," I said. "You weren't even born then. Neither were you. But we were here. We're always here." She touched my hand. and her fingers felt like static electricity. Every choice, every moment, they all lead here. To this night, to this place. The photograph began to change, cycling through different versions of the gas station. In some, it was new and pristine. In others, abandoned and decaying. In one, it was nothing but ashes and foundations. I don't understand, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, memories began to surface. Memories that couldn't be mine, but somehow were. I remembered proposing to Emma in this parking lot, on a night just like this one. I remembered fighting with her here, watching her drive away forever. I remembered growing old together and dying alone, and never meeting at all. Every possible version of our story playing out simultaneously. The code, I whispered, finally understanding. The security flaw I was trying to fix. It wasn't just about data protection, was it? Emma shook her head. It was about time, about moments, about the walls between what is and what could be. She squeezed my hand. You built it, David. Not just tonight, but in every version of tonight. A program that could find the spaces between moments, the places where time pools and eddies. You were trying to find a way back. Back to us. Back to the moment when things started to go wrong. The fog pressed against the windows now, seeping in through invisible cracks. In its swirling patterns, I could see fragments of other lives, other choices. Me, staying late at the office, missing dinner again. Emma, waiting at home, slowly giving up hope. The slow decay of what we had, death by 1,000 tiny moments of neglect. But I also saw other possibilities. Me, closing the laptop, choosing her instead of work. Us, growing together instead of apart. 1,000 tiny moments of choice, of love, of attention. Why here? I asked. Why this place? Because this is where it happens, Emma said softly. The moment when you choose. When you decide what matters more, the deadline or the dream. The future you're planning or the present you're missing. The lights flickered again, and suddenly I was back in my office, staring at my computer screen. Lines of code scrolled past, including the security flaw I'd been trying to fix. But now I could see what it really was, not just a bug, but a door. A way to step outside of time, to see all the moments at once. Emma stood in the doorway, wearing that vintage leather jacket. Come on, she said, holding out her hand. Let's go for a drive. Through the window behind her, I could see the fog rolling in, and in the distance, a single light pierced the darkness. The gas station was waiting. I looked down at my hands. They were transparent, fading like old photographs. And somewhere, in the distance, I heard the sound of breaking glass, of metal crushing metal, of Emma screaming my name as our car spun out of control on a foggy night 7 years ago, or tomorrow, or in a future that hadn't happened yet. The night that keeps happening, over and over, every time I close my eyes. The last time I ever will. Or maybe the first time I won't. I stood up from my desk, leaving the code unfinished. The security flaw would still be there tomorrow, but Emma, this moment, this choice, might not be. Okay, I said, taking her hand. Let's drive. As we walked to the elevator, I glanced at my phone one last time. The screen showed an email notification. Critical security update required. Below it, in smaller text, time remaining, midnight. I turned off the phone. Outside, the fog was waiting. And somewhere in the distance, a light flickered in the darkness, calling us home to a moment that had always been waiting, to a choice that had always needed to be made. Emma squeezed my hand as we walked to her car. Do you remember what else I said that night we met? After you asked what I was looking for, I shook my head. I said that sometimes the most important moments are the ones we almost miss. The ones that happen when we're too busy looking somewhere else. She smiled, and in the fog-diffused light, she looked exactly like she had that night in college, and exactly like she would 50 years from now, and exactly like she always would in the moments between moments. This time, she said, don't miss it. And as we drove into the fog, toward the light that was both ahead of us and behind us, I finally understood what she meant. Time isn't a line or even a pool. It's a choice. 1,000 choices. And every moment is another chance to make them right. The gas station's light flickered in the distance, calling us home to the moment that had always been waiting, to the choice that had always needed to be made. This time, I chose differently. This time, I chose us. This time, I chose the moment. And somewhere, in the spaces between seconds, in the moments between moments, time held its breath and waited to see what would happen next. Just like it always had. Just like it always would. Forever. And there you have it, friends. If you enjoyed this thrilling story about time, love, and second chances, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more captivating tales. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss our next upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.